Okay, I just wanted to make sure my camera was working. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Again, it's just been one of the. My hair looks like really puffy. Anyway, I blew dry it. That's why. So it's quite bouncy and full. But it's been one of those crazy weeks. But I wanted to at least get in a history show. The next topical one, I've got some Michael Knowles clips queued up. Won't be tomorrow because tomorrow's date night, but will probably be over the weekend. Let's do the YouTuber stuff and then we will get right into it. I'm looking for, here we go. So subscribe to the channel. I would super appreciate it. We are getting near 7,000 subscribers. I know that's still a very small channel, but considering the niche that I have, I'm pretty proud of that. And you can follow me on Twitter. I am at Karen Ann Harlos. And last but not least, please support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. You actually get a bunch more benefits than it used to be because you get advanced showings of my other channels, which is Jurassic Dictionary and Pink Parliamentarian. Those are short shows under 10 minutes. And I don't mind doing on these history shows a little bit more chit chat right up front about LP stuff or just personal. If you're wondering when I'm going to get my camera straightened out because it's still not the greatest quality, forget it. My phone just ain't working. So I'm now experimenting with Wayne's Nikon DSLR, and we'll see if we can get that up and running. I guess there's a reason why I bought this cam link a while ago. Well, I guess we'll see if it works. I've had this sitting around forever, and those of you following just LP stuff, I have regained my full access. So that's been done. Mr. Nikela kept his word after the, quite honestly, games that were played by the former chair after the Judicial Committee decision, but we're not going to be dealing with that. The past is the past. We are doing our, God, I keep getting hair on my mouth. We are doing the, it's really going crazy. That'd be a funny screenshot. We are on the third episode of going through January, February 1977 LP news. It's the last one I'm going to do out of these. Not this weekend, but next weekend I will be in Pennsylvania. I am their convention parliamentarian once again. So if you're up that way, hopefully I will see you at the convention. So the one article I said I did want to cover, we might do one more next week. And if we do, I see another article that I may want to cover. But I wanted to deal with something that was very topical in the 70s. Now, of course, it could come up again, but I just remember this time so well. Obviously, I wasn't in the LP. I was just a kid, but it is the U.S. energy crisis, the real story. So let's see what, I haven't read the article yet. We're going to go through it together. What the LP news writers had to say about the real story of the energy crisis in 1977. All right. Now remember, this is tiny print. I was having such trouble before, but I seem to be seeing a little bit better today. So this is by someone by the name of D.T. Armentano. You know me and names. Armentano, yes. All right. It is undeniable that the continued existence of a sophisticated industrial economy depends on adequate energy supplies. It is also obvious that an increasing standard of living depends on relatively abundant and relatively cheap energy supplies. Okay, I think so far it's Captain Obvious. Yet for decades, government policy has been oriented not toward promoting discovery and production of these supplies for the general consumer interest, but merely toward satisfying the desires of a particular group of producers and users of energy. And boy, have we seen that going. And Ski2 in chat says that this gentleman wrote a book on antitrust. So apparently a libertarian author that I just didn't know anything about. And look at this picture. That's like so 1970s, isn't it? that jacket. And sorry, I don't mean to be like picking on somebody's looks. This just isn't a good picture. Look how long his neck looks. I don't know if you can tell. I think it's just because he's wearing a turtleneck, but it's like, hello, Mr. Giraffe. Okay. Sorry, that was mean. Anyway. And he's so serious. It's almost like a Victorian picture. Just so serious. Such groups, not content to accept the results of free market operations, have obtained legislation designed to further their own self-interest. Now, this is a long article. I don't know if we're going to get through it all. I just wanted to at least get the flavor of it, but there's nothing new under the sun. Doesn't that sound just like today? Most of the public accepts the notion that the energy crunch began with the 1973 Arab oil embargo. In fact, that was just the final blow in a series of staggering policies, some dating back over 4 decades. From 1950 to 1970, the energy industry operated smoothly and efficiently, without shortages and with amazing price stability. But entering this decade, as government policy became increasingly obnoxious, but he repeats himself. Sorry, I cracked myself up. I entertain myself. And destructive, the effects of energy interventionism began to come to a head. The consequences of this intervention are now readily apparent. Shortages of important commodities and sharp price increases for others, growing dependence on foreign sources of fuel, de facto rationing of petroleum products and costly delays in obtaining them, the emergency, it says the emergency, I think it means emergence. I find a lot of typos in these. Emergency of a black or gray market for commodities in many industries, consumer hoarding, and dire predictions of future shortfalls of gasoline, crude oil, and natural gas, all amid a state of public bewilderment on the causes and remedies to this crisis. The tragic irony of it all is that dozens of economists, industry spokesmen, even government officials have warned for years that certain policies would ultimately produce severe shortages, but their warnings went unheeded. The Financial Weekly Barons called for an end to Federal Power Commissions, FPC. Is that still around? Did we get rid of a 3-letter agency? Because I've never heard of the FPC. Do I just have the dumb right now? But I've never heard of that. The Federal Power Commission. Regulation of natural gas as early as 1955. Paul McAvoy, leading scholar on natural gas economics, predicted a shortage in 1962. Since the mid-1960s, journals like Chemical and Engineering News, Oil and Gas Journal, and Public Utilities Fortnightly. Oh, does that sound exciting? Honey, where are you hiding my copy of Oil and Gas Journal and Public Utilities Fortnightly? Do you Never mind, I'm not going to make dirty jokes. But they just read it for the articles, not the centerfold, trust me. Have been issuing urgent alerts on the impending crisis. Fortune made an uncanny prediction of the consequences of our pro-rationing system in 1965. And in 1970, the New York Times blasted the oil import quota system, warning it would soon produce a crude oil shortage. I'm sorry, I'm just still cracking up. Who the hell named a magazine Oil and Gas Journal and Public Utilities Fortnightly? Is it just me that finds that funny? I think it's just me. I am twisted. In government, then Secretary of the Interior, Fred A. Seaton, predicted shortages of electrical power due to explosive increases in demand back in June 1957 and 1970. Interior's Dr. Wilson M. Laird forecasts severe strains on natural gas supply by 1975, stating we are rapidly passing from a phase of energy abundance to one of energy scarcity. And the FPC itself forsook its own regulations years ago. In the face of all these warnings, in the face of insurmountable evidence on the failure of government policy, he repeats himself once again, Congress continues to fight deregulation and continues to castigate the energy industry and consumers for creating the crisis. For Congress to concede the deregulatory case would be to admit responsibility for the inestimable damage its policies have caused. Okay, made sense. The most flagrantly wrong-headed policy has been price controls. When prices are free to fluctuate, changes in supply and demand don't produce shortages, but simply higher or lower prices that accommodate the new market situation. But when the price of a commodity is fixed by government, it can no longer reflect greater demand or lesser supply. A fixed price not only encourages demand for the commodity, but also discourages its supply. This sounds like this is just a sexy column that could have came from the Oil and Gas Journal and Public Utilities Fortnightly, doesn't it? It's very scintillating. Okay, I gotta find my spot. With the quantity demanded increasing and the quantity supplied decreasing, a gap or shortage of the commodity soon develops. In the absence of a price change, that shortage must be rationed, and through non-price techniques such as the allocation provisions of President Carter's Emergency Energy Program for natural gas, and such as the Federal Energy Administration's, I've never heard of them either. Is that another three-letter agency I just don't know about? Authority to reallocate oil supplies from one refinery to another and fuel supplies from one region to another. The most disastrous example of price controls is FPC regulation of producer, what does it say, wellhead natural gas rates? I don't know what that means. Ordered by the Supreme Court in 1954, the FPC effectively froze prices in interstate commerce at 1958 through 1960 levels for 12 years, in spite of an unprecedented increase in the demand for natural gas. And then there's a chart talking about prices from that time. We're not going to go through that. Although interstate prices for new natural gas have risen sharply since 1971, they are still well below the equilibrium rate. And give some prices again for that time. While demand for this clean burning fuel soared, and I remember we had natural gas at my home. I grew up in Pompano Beach, Florida. For those of you who don't know, we had this. I remember Pompano Gas. We used to have to come and fill like the underground tank we had. Does natural gas like explode easily? Because I was always like just freaking paranoid about it exploding. I don't know why. I was a weird kid. Lots of phobias. Did not like pool drains, by the way. I'm sure you just wanted to know that, and that was completely random, but I was just thinking of things buried in the ground, and then I thought of our pool in the backyard and said, damn, I did not like that drain. All right, back to the topic. The gas that was found was diverted, where possible, into interstate commerce. Moreover, firms that had large supplies, an expectation that federal prices would be deregulated or increased to meet drilling costs and provide a reasonable profit. The net result has been that proven reserves of natural gas actually dropped from 289 trillion cubic feet in 1966 to 266 trillion cubic feet in 1972. The production to reserve ratio declined sharply from 20.1 years in 1961 to scarcely 10 years at present. The government then, not the weather, must bear ultimate responsibility for this year's natural gas crisis. Having already set the economy up for an unprecedented shortage of natural gas, the government began regulating the price of crude oil in the summer of 1971, the Nixon wage and price controls. As world prices increased, we're not going to deal with the actual prices back then. Average domestic crude oil prices were still some 30% below the rest of the world because of FEA regulations. Again, the inevitable consequence was to discourage production and selling and to severely retard use of secondary and tertiary recovery techniques. As a result, it was just reported that oil imports now comprise fully 50% of American consumption. We still have that problem today. That higher prices would increase supplies and discourage demand is not a controversial point among professional economists. Professor Graham of Texas A&M has estimated demand for energy would decline as much as 1.2% if prices were increased 1%, while the quantity supplied would increase as much as 2%. Economists Huthacker and Verlager estimate that petroleum supplies would increase in at least 1-to-1 proportion to price. This is really scintillating. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Whether or not price increases would actually triple reserves, it is certain that additional supplies would be forthcoming if only the prices were attractive enough to make production worthwhile. In other words, when you control the prices to where you make it that it's not profitable, you're not going to have people doing that industry because we want to make money. That's simple enough. So let's just skip ahead a little bit. A common rejoinder to the argument about increasing prices and incentives is that the oil and gas companies are already so rich. You could just hear AOC right now, can't you? They don't need additional incentives to explore and produce. But by almost any measure, the petroleum industry has not realized exorbitant profits. In fact, the industry's net income as a percentage of total revenue declined from 9% in 1962 to 8.7% in 1969 to 6.6% in 1972. Net income as a percentage of net worth declined from 13.1% in 1968 to 11% in 1970 to 10.8% in 1972. I wonder what it is now. The average return on net worth for the entire petroleum industry between 1963 and 1972 was 11.8%, compared with the overall manufacturing average of 12.2%. Industry earnings, as well as the price-earnings multiple on industry stock, was lower than many other industries. Given the high element of risk associated with these investments, and given the massive capital requirements of this industry over the next 15 years, these profit statistics hardly appear exorbitant. Indeed, Whiten might argue that the relatively poor profitability of the oil industry has contributed to present shortage problems and may bode ill for the future. Some have argued that the monopolistic nature of the oil and gas industry has produced the present crisis. However, there is neither good economic theory nor empirical fact to support this contention. There are at least 128 corporations engaged in the refining of domestic crude oil, with the four largest controlling less than 33% of industry output. In addition, there are over 7,000 firms that explore for and produce oil and natural gas, 15,000 that wholesale gasoline, 18,000 more that sell fuel oil and liquefied petroleum gas, and close to 202,000 gasoline service stations. Ironically, where monopolistic practices have occurred is not through private action among a few large firms, but through governmental action. Surprise, surprise, surprise. The most blatant supply restricting policy in the industry is state pro-rationing. Started in the 1930s, purportedly as a conservationist remedy to the wastes of competition, pro-rationing developed into government-mandated cartel scheme for restricting production to estimated demand in order to maintain prices at existing levels. For example, the Texas Railroad Commission would meet every month to determine how many days oil producers would be allowed to operate their wells that particular month. The commission would then coordinate demand estimates from oil buyers and allocate this sounds like an Ayn Rand novel, doesn't it? And allocate output quotas per well to fill the demand as estimated at existing prices. Beside restricting supplies and fixing prices higher than the free market would, and then it continues, which is something you just don't see nowadays. Okay. It led to gross inefficiencies. Okay, we get all of that. And I'm just skipping ahead here. And it's just basically telling us about how the laws created the crisis. And it ends, finally, no study of the energy crisis would be complete without mention of the problem that prompted price controls and aggravated all the shortage situations discussed here, price inflation. Much of the increase in demand for energy has been a necessary consequence of the excessive growth in the money supply that took place between 1967 and 1972, which spurred demand for all goods and services, aggravating shortage situations. Price controls, pro-rationing, quotas, natural gas regulation, tax policies, environmental strictures, inflation. Add them all up and you get crisis. The next time you hear someone explain that America needs an energy policy, point out to them that America has had an energy policy for years and it has been a total disaster. Okay, dry reading fortnightly, but we could have done the TLDR. What do you think the TLDR would have been on this? So, problem, we have an energy crisis. Why? TLDR. Government. It would have been a lot shorter. But the thing that amazes me about these old LP news is, like, libertarians really wanted this very information-dense publication. Whereas today, if you can't say it in a tweet, we don't want to hear it. And I think we are all the poorer for that. And now we have AI doing thinking for us, so we're all just becoming a bunch of morons. All right, everyone. I think I've had enough of that for this evening. Next again, not tonight, but I am going to be doing another bonus episode on the morality of capitalism. That is patron-only content. But I'm really looking forward to doing the Michael Knowles critique because he's so encapsulated on how the Republicans love regulation, and he's celebrating that they love regulation now. It's just got to be the right regulation. Isn't that exactly what the left thinks? They just disagree on what's right. That's what happened once you say that coercive government force is acceptable. Everyone is always going to be battling over who knows what's best for the rest of us to be able to force everyone else. Well, I hope you all have an awesome night. It's supposed to, I think, snow again here tonight and be a bit chilly tomorrow, but we shall see. And I will see you over the weekend. I hope you have an awesome night. Bye-bye.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want to